exactly right in order to preserve this reverence to God before you met God, before you encountered God, before you offered anything to God. This past summer, my family and I went to Washington, D.C., and we wanted to go into the White House. Well, years ago, you were able to just kind of show up and get tickets and you could go in, but not anymore since 9/11. We had to submit our Social Security numbers for all four of us in advance, well in advance, so that they could do a background check on us. And then when we arrived on that particular day, after they gave us the green light, we had a particular number. We went up to stand in line, and we got checked. Before we even got close to the White House, we got checked. You were not allowed to bring any type of product, thing, stuff into the White House. No cameras, no video cameras, no cell phones, nothing. If you brought them to the checkpoint, they would confiscate them, and you wouldn't get them back, or you could not go in. That was the second checkpoint. The first one was a criminal background check. Then we got there a second background check, a second check on us. And then when we got inside, we had a third check as we went through a scanner. All these checks before we got in the White House to make sure that we were safe, before we even got near where the president might be. And he might not even be there, and we still had to go through this precautions. It gave us a deep sense of respect for the White House and their checks. Similar in the Old Testament, before a priest or someone would go into the Holy of Holies, check after check after check after check, to safeguard, to protect, to guarantee that when that person met God, they did so with reverence and fear and a deep appreciation for God. This is the mindset of a Jewish person at the time of the birth of Christ, a deep, deep sense of reverence. Now, can you imagine if you were Mary or Joseph or any Jewish person with this in your mindset and this in your head, thinking about the reverence of God, and you hear these words, Emmanuel, God with us. Emmanuel, God draws near to us. Absolutely, the people, if they heard this news, when they heard this news, there must have been amazement, shock, and most likely disbelief. No way, absolutely no way would God draw near to us. We very carefully draw near to God, but God not drawing near to us. Emmanuel, God with us. And then we see God coming in the form of a baby in a rural, quiet manger surrounded by animals and shepherds. He didn't come in the temple where you might actually understand that. But he came outside the temple into a rural, quiet town called Bethlehem. Emmanuel, God is with us. See, from this moment, right here, from this moment, the moment, like tonight, some 2,000 years ago, in that moment, when God enters this world, when God comes down into a rural, quiet manger, from that moment, we have the promise, the hope that God is always with us. That he draws near to us, that he will be close to us. That those who receive Christ, there is a guarantee. I will never leave you nor forsake you. You don't have to come to the temple. I will be with you forever. There is a promise of companionship, of closeness. Emmanuel, God with us. I thought about this recently. And I've wondered, why do a lot of Christians sometimes feel lonely? Well, why do we feel lonely at times? Why do we feel like no one understands? Like this person I was trying to encourage, who was a believer, but there's this understanding of like no one understands, and I feel all alone, that I'm afraid, that I'm insecure. Why do we sometimes as believers feel like that when we have this great truth called Emmanuel, God with us? How do we reconcile this feeling we have with this truth, the reality that God says, I will never leave you nor forsake you? And I thought about that. Why is that the case? Why did this person feel alone? And my conclusion is this, that this truth called Emmanuel, this truth called the incarnation, the nearness of God, has simply grown too familiar to us. Too familiar to us. That this truth that is explosive, that has weight to Mary, that would have been explosive and had weight to anybody who heard it in this moment, because this had never happened before, that God would draw near to us. This weight, this explosiveness, it has lost its explosion to us. That we have forgot the great truth that God is with us. Emmanuel. And with anything that has become so familiar to us, we oftentimes neglect it. Anything that has become so familiar to us, we begin to take it for granted. We don't utilize it. We don't rely on it. We don't grab onto it. It just has become blasé and normal. I have a watch here. And some of you might know that I really don't like watches. I don't like the feel of them. So what will happen is oftentimes I will wear a watch, as I'm doing tonight, and as soon as I get to my office, I take it off. Or as soon as I get home, I take it off. I rarely look at my watch. It's there to help me. It's there to tell me time. It's there to get me to places on time, but I rarely look at it. In fact, a while back, the battery died, and it wasn't working, but you know what? I still wore it. And when I got to my office, I took it off. And I put it back on, and when I got home, I took it off. I was wearing a watch, and it did me no good. Couldn't tell time with it. Couldn't get anywhere on time. Absolutely no good to me. I was wearing it, but it was absolutely not useful to me. And when I think about God, I think this is probably like us so oftentimes with this truth. Emmanuel, God with us. We know it. God will never leave us nor abandon us nor forsake us. We know it. We know that God is with us, that He drew near to us, that He came in the form of a baby to be close to us. We know it. But just like a watch that's not working, we don't utilize it. We don't rely on it. It does us no good if we don't embrace it. We can come here tonight and say, Emmanuel, God with us, but if we go home and then we check God out at the door, and God isn't with us in our homes, it's like a broken watch. It does no good. If we embrace here and say, yes, God is with us, and then we go in a few days to work, and we are a different person, and we get stressed out, and we get anxious. It's like a watch that's not working. it does no good. Emmanuel, God with us. If we go into our life after the first of the year, and in the back of our heads, yes, God is with us. He is near to us. He will never abandon us. But then we don't rely on him. We don't cling to him. We don't pray to him. It does absolutely no good. God came to draw near to us that we would have God with us. Emmanuel, God with you. God with me. God with us. That if we embrace God, if we invite God, he will come into our homes. He will come into our life. He will come into our workplaces. That is what God desires to do. He did not desire that we come here simply to find God, but to actually take God with us wherever we go. The promise of Emmanuel, God with us. Never will I leave you. Never will I abandon you. I will be with you every second of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year, of your life, if you want me to. It takes a choice to say, God, I want Emmanuel, God with me. God will be with us in despair. God will be with us in praise. God will be with us in this sense of loneliness, even though we're not, because God is with us. God will be with us at these great moments in life. At marriage, the birth of a child. God will be with us when we're afraid. God will be with us when we're on top of the world. God will be with us when we feel insecure. Emmanuel, God with us. Always. What did I say to this person that was discouraged? This is what I said. God is with you. You feel alone, but you're not, because you love Christ and he is with you. Emmanuel, God with you. You feel like no one understands. God understands because he loves you and is with you and walks through this pain with you. You feel insecure. Well, God is with you in that sense of insecurity. Emmanuel, God with us. We come tonight to celebrate the birth of God. Not in a temple, not simply up in the heavens, but near us in our lives if we embrace him. Emmanuel, God with us. I don't know where some of you might stand tonight. Maybe you don't have that nearness. Maybe you have never accepted Christ. Maybe you're coming tonight because it's the right thing to do on a Christmas Eve. And you want to give a nod to God. If you allow him, if you invite him, if you welcome him into your world, if you welcome him into your world, into your life, into your hearts, and say, I am a sinner, as we sung about. I need Christ. Come, save me, redeem me, as you want to in your own words. If you do that, this promise, Emmanuel, God with you, will hold true and come to bear fruit in your life. And he'll walk out with you. You will not go alone. You will be with God if you just cry out to him and say, forgive me. But for all of us, if you love and know Christ and you feel at times alone, what we need to do, for those that have embraced Christ already, we need to capture the weight and the explosiveness of this verse, Emmanuel, God with us. That we grab on and say, wait a second. We have a God who loves us so much. We have a God who is gloriously great, who threw the stars in place, who our minds explode when we think about it. We have a God who loves us so much, so much, so much.